It takes a bit of nerve to be a scammer. They're no longer content with getting away with a few $100s at a time. These days, they will go after every penny that you have. Honestly, whenever we have to report something to the police in India, police can't usually give me any feedback. And I'm always left wondering, did they do anything at all? And I'll never know for sure sometimes.
It's interesting working with the authorities because a lot of what we do here and what you do, it operates in this sort of gray area of what is legal and what is illegal. Have you ever been prosecuted or close to it?
That is Jim Browning, the godfather of scambaiting. He hunts down cybercriminals, the ones stealing billions of dollars from innocent people. He hacks their systems, exposes their scams, basically dismantles entire criminal organizations from his laptop.
The scammers have no difficulty accessing a victim's computer without their permission. So if the police can't do that, then they're kind of fighting crime with one hand tied behind their back. I have provided the police with real evidence of real victims, which is what they want. But as soon as I reported it, the call center went dark.
How do you think they've been able to scale so rapidly from $50 Amazon gift cards to hundreds of thousands of dollars in wire transfers?
The actual truth to the matter is...
Before we get into this interview with Jim Browning, I want to give a big shout out to AnyDesk, the official sponsor of the Scammer Payback podcast. Look, we've been working with the guys at AnyDesk for the last couple years now, and they're really leading the way in the fight against scammers. They've stepped up in a ton of different ways, whether that's helping out with scam victims, creating a tech coalition with a bunch of other companies to fight these scammers. Even just partnering with channels like us shows the world that AnyDesk means business. And if you work in the IT space or you need remote access software, you should definitely check them out. Their software is top-notch, and they're constantly coming out with brand new features to help boost your productivity. So once again, big shout out to AnyDesk for sponsoring the SP podcast, and let's get into this conversation with Jim Browning. Jim, I wanted to actually ask you about this, the Godfather of Scambaiting, that title. I see so many people give it to you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
It's better than the old man of scambaiting, which is kind of closer to the truth. No, I guess I've been one of the longest, let's say, surviving scambaiters. I'll not say I was the first, but at the same time, there probably weren't a lot of scambaiting channels at the time that I started up. So being known for that isn't a bad thing. I kind of enjoy it, and it's really nice to see that. And I'm grateful that the channel's still there.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a lot of the guys here, the younger guys, Midnight and Nano, they look up to you as sort of this father figure in the scambaiting space. How does it feel having that responsibility?
I'm kind of glad because I am older than they are, obviously, and I'm kind of glad that I'm almost at their level. There's kind of a degree of coolness, and let's just say that because they're so much younger than me, it's nice to have a set of people who don't look at you like some old boy, and I'm almost their peer. And that's kind of nice, it's nice for me, and it's a little bit different,
Yeah. Another thing that I see in a lot of articles and shows or interviews with you is that they always say, Jim Browning. That's not his real name, by the way. They always add that in there.
Yeah.
Where did the name Jim Browning actually come from?
Oh, I wish there was a better story about this than there is, but the actual truth to the matter is, the reason why I even created the YouTube channel was simply to say, I've got this video file captured here, and what's the easiest way of emailing that to someone? And I thought, there's this YouTube platform. I'll put it on there and say, here's a link. So I actually created the name off the top of my head about 11 years ago. And I wish to goodness at this point that I'd thought of something a little bit, like an anagram of my real name or something a little bit more sophisticated than that. But unfortunately, there isn't a huge story to it. Off the top of my head, first thing I thought of.
It's interesting that you say you wish you had come up with an anagram for your real name, but I feel like that would have been even more dangerous because if someone had put it back together, it would actually be...
Yeah, I mean, I would never tell them it was an anagram for my real name.
Of course.
Maybe some people could have worked that out, and there probably are anagrams of Jim Browning. So I guess I'm going to put that into a little anagram declusterer and then pretend that's my real name. No, it's just very spontaneous, no real thought to it, sorry.
So you created the channel originally because you wanted to send videos around and stuff.
Yep.
Which makes me wonder, were you sending your content out to people that you knew? Did they know that you were Jim Browning people in real life?
No, in fact, the reason why I sent this or had a link to it was I had recorded a scammer trying to scam me. And very naively, I thought, I will send this to the guy's internet service provider because it worked out his IP address.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought would happen was that if I sent a copy of what this guy was doing, that they would look at that and go, right, we'll throw him off the network or throw this person off the network. And very, very simply, it was to go to an ISP and hope they would do something. So that I couldn't, obviously a video file is large. You can't normally email that. So I thought, right, I'm going to send a link and maybe they'll throw him off the network. They did not throw him off the network. But yeah, that was the reason.
That's kind of like the catalyst for everything that you've done since. I mean, when you sent that video, did you have any idea that you were going to keep making content like this, scam baiting content?
Absolutely not. And I had no intention of being a YouTuber. And yes, like I say, 11 years ago, it was simply a way to export a video file. And that was it. I mean, I, at that stage, have, and up until very recently, did have a non-YouTube job. Ultimately, what I wanted to do was continue my normal job, but kind of do this as a little bit of a hobby, a little sideline. I mean, I think scams are an interesting topic. You know, I kept being asked, why do these guys pretend to be Microsoft? What do they actually do when they get onto your computer? And I thought, I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna record it clearly. No intention of putting it on YouTube. It was just for my own fascination about this. So that's really how it started. And I was surprised, more surprised probably than anyone else, that people actually took a look at those videos because I didn't expect it. I expected 2 or 3 views from the ISP and that would be the end of it. But no, I'm still staggered even now that people actually like watching this as content.
It's funny to me to think about the guy or gal that was at the ISP that watched the video that you sent them for the first time. I wonder if they know what happened, like the snowball effect of they watched that video and then now you've got, you know, over 4 million subs and they've been following your journey this entire time. That would be kind of funny to...
Yeah, I must look back. I may even have the original email that I sent with that link on just to see. Obviously completely unintended, but at the same time, just because I find scams fascinating, I like digging into it. I like the psychology behind them. In a strange sort of way, I like the kind of a sneak admiration for the way they go about their business. I would never admit that, you know, but it takes a bit of nerve to be a scammer as well.
Yeah.
So seeing all that play out, I think is always fascinating. So I'm glad other people think like that, you know, and I know certainly in your channel, you know, you guys really bring that to the fore. But most of all, when you can see these guys, when you can see them on their CCTV and webcam, that really opens a whole different kettle of fish, you know.
I think people have always just been fascinated by like getting into the mind of a criminal. I mean, obviously, like more traditionally, you have people that want to know about murderers and stuff like this, but I think that scammers really do fascinate a lot of people. People want to know why they're doing what they're doing. And by that same token, people want to know why you do what you do. So it's interesting that it all just kind of started as like this, you know, a fluke really.
Yeah, you're right. In general, people, I mean, that's why I think like crime documentaries, crime TV channels even exist. People are fascinated by it. But I think we as scam baiters get a very, very unique view about, you know, if you look at the TV channels, the reenactments, whereas what we see is really happening in real time. And there's a huge appetite for that. So I've been working with the BBC recently enough, and there's actually on the 3rd series now where they actually do what I do, but play it out in real time. And they go that little stage further because not only do we kind of watch and listen into phone calls, but they now have something called ground interceptors. So they have people in cars over the UK, and those people will try to intercept the scams live. And I didn't think this was going to be possible because the chances of having a scammer interact with a victim and having a car close by that can come in and you would get people to kind of try and stop the scam midway through, I didn't think it was going to be possible, but they actually pushed for it. And now the TV program actually shows a lot of instances where we've been able to intercept scams, even people in like shopping centers, shopping malls, buying gift cards or going into banks, and they've been able to stop them midway through. So didn't think it was possible, probably isn't possible in the US, but the UK is probably just about the right size where that is possible.
It's interesting that you bring up scam interceptors because to me, that's such an example of how the scam bait genre and the content that's created has really put, scams at the forefront of people's minds.
Yep.
And how, I don't want to dig too hard into this, but law enforcement hasn't done necessarily the best job in the past of protecting people from getting scammed.
Yep.
I know that we work with federal contacts here in the U.S. What is your relationship like with the authorities in the U.K.?
So it's, I would say, as good as it can be. I try to report if I see, whenever I report, it's usually the scammers are not in the UK. That's the first thing, So very rarely will I report real scammers operating there. It rarely happens. It does the odd time, but I rarely see it. Far more often, you will see victims in the UK. And when I get in contact with police, it's usually to do something like for their welfare. So can you go to this person there in the midst of posting cash to some other address? And that's usually where I get involved. And I will contact the police saying, look, this person is being scammed. They are posting money to this address. Can you do something at that address? And I would say the relationship is good, except that the police can't usually give me any feedback. And that's the kind of almost annoying thing. It's kind of one-way traffic. I will say, this person being scammed, here's the address the money's going to. Can you do something about it? But I rarely get to hear what they actually do at that address, if anything. And I'm always left wondering, did they do anything at all? And I'll never know for sure sometimes. You very occasionally get a bit of feedback, but it's usually one-way traffic.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of the stuff that we hear over here is it's like we'll get very general kind of updates about what happened with the information that we gave them. Sometimes it's nothing at all.
Yep.
Do you think that there's a way that we can work better with the authorities to make sure that these people are safe after?
It's hard to know. I think they withhold information for a reason. And I would like to hope that reason is that they want to actually try and convict the people behind the scams. But like I say, it rarely happens that the scammers are actually within the UK as well. So I don't really see the problem in sharing information, particularly if it means saving a victim. Now, it would be different if there was like a UK court case and they can't comment on it or something. But we know that the majority of scammers are not usually in the same country as the victim. So honestly, I don't really see why they wouldn't divulge that information. Certainly, I would like to know, and if I make a video, it would be nice to be able to say, we genuinely did stop this, and not only that, we're able to intercept more packages or whatever at this address. It would just be nice to report that, but like I say, it rarely happens, and I wish it would. I wish they would be a bit more open about it.
It's interesting working with the authorities because a lot of what we do here and what you do, it operates in this sort of gray area of what is legal and what is illegal. Have you ever been prosecuted or close to it?
No, is the short answer. And if you're looking at the definitions of law, of course, if I access somebody's computer without their permission, I'm committing an offence. There's no two ways about that. But I've often spoken to police about that. And the only reason why they would ever come after me was if I overstepped, like stole the money back from them. So that I do just enough to identify who this person is, how their scam works, where they're operating from, and I go to the authorities. And genuinely, they like getting that information because they wouldn't normally get that sort of detail. So that's the key bit for me. And I've spoken to enough people so far that I'm pretty confident that they would never want to come after me. In fact, just the opposite. I think they kind of encourage me to do this, although they'll never say that openly because at the end of the road, you're committing an offense and they would never want to see that being like...
They don't want to endorse your behavior,
Correct.
even if it is useful for them.
Correct. So, I would never encourage other people to do what I do either. For that reason, because they can get into trouble. But I think if you have red lines, as in you do enough to identify who this is, where it is, what's happening, and report it, I don't think there's ever a problem with that. It's the right thing to do.
I feel like with the way that technology has been advancing so quickly, we're going to start to need like people in the police force or in the federal authorities that can do the stuff that you guys do in order to actually effectively combat these scams. Because I mean, right now we've got probably some of like the top 10 guys in the entire space all here right now. And it's proven to be pretty effective, but I think it could be even more effective if they actually had people dedicated in their force to this kind of stuff.
Correct. And I'm pretty sure the people in this room would be in a position to help the police out. But the first thing that would have to change is the law itself. The law is just a little bit too broad at the moment. And I think everybody's afraid to say, look, there needs to be provision to do what we do. The scammers have no difficulty accessing a victim's computer without their permission or knowledge or agreement. So if the police can't do that, then they're kind of fighting crime with one hand tied behind their back. So the laws should be able to change. Now you have to, I don't want it to be like everything's fair game for law enforcement. That, that's too far as well.
Yeah.
But there should be a happy medium. And if you can identify a known scam, and they're very easy to identify, and if you have provision in law to say that if you are running a certain type of scam, then the police can legally go after your computer. And I think it could be worded in that sort of way. And if that was the case, then I think that is the way to go. And then we shouldn't need to be sitting with, you do this like as a kind of an underground nearly thing. And the police should be doing exactly what we do.
Are there laws in India to stop them, like cyber laws, to stop them from connecting to PCs? Or is it really just the part where they steal the money that gets them in trouble over there?
No, there's cyber laws. They're no different to the US and UK laws. And it basically means that if you're accessing somebody's computer without their permission, then that's illegal. And what you tend to find is most scammers will never explain to their victim that what they're doing is getting a remote connection to that victim. They will say, please, you need to browse to our secure server. And that never gives the victim enough information to know exactly what's going on. What they really mean to say is, I'm going to take control of your computer. I'm going to be able to see what's in your bank account. But the problem is that's quite difficult to prosecute. It's far easier for the police, particularly in India, to say, unless money has been stolen, we can't do anything. But if honestly, their existing laws should be enough to come after scammers who both impersonate companies and access those computers that they shouldn't be accessing. They could do that, but I've never actually seen any police force, even outside India, try to use the legal tools that they've got against scammers, and they should do it.
It's so strange to me. Like, it feels like there shouldn't be such a big barrier between, we have the evidence of somebody accessing a computer illegally and then getting that person prosecuted. Why do you think it's so difficult for them to prosecute that?
I think it's like, to be honest, most police services in the world, they're quite behind the times when it comes to technology. What they really understand is money has been stolen, and that's what they're traditionally used to. And it would take maybe another generation, I think, of people who are used to computers, used to computer crime, and have trained people to understand those laws, for the laws to change, and ultimately for them to go after the people who break computer misuse laws. Honestly, whenever we have to report something to the police in India, you know yourself, it's never good enough to say these guys are impersonating Amazon. It has to be, this guy has actually stolen from this person, and ideally it's within the same country. So again, it's just what the police are used to.
Do you think that we can move fast enough in this like race between us and technology to train the police forces and get people in the police forces that are knowledgeable enough to know about these cyber crimes?
Well, I mean, I've been sitting with journalists and who are not computer trained people. And we have produced television programs out of people who are not well trained, not well versed in computers. So absolutely, you can do this with people in the police. And there are more than enough scammers that, you could be watching scammers trying to save victims all day, every day, 24/7. And I would certainly not have a problem training somebody up in the police to do what I do. And I would welcome that because, they could be saving people's money and ideally gathering evidence against some of these crime groups and going after them. That would be great.
What do you think makes it so difficult for law enforcement in the US and the UK to get after these people in India? Like, do you think there's not a good enough relationship between the two countries in terms of their law enforcement and what they're willing to do?
Yeah, I don't think that I have never had a very clear answer to that. It always comes down to jurisdiction and the police in the UK and the US in general. If the crime was happening within the country boundary, if it was all within the country, they actually do take notice of that, do take action, have taken action. They've gone after your money mules quite a bit. You guys especially know all about that. Mm-hmm. And in general, they're quite good at it. There's no such thing as an international police service. And it depends bizarrely on their relationship with their counterparts in other countries. And unless that is a good relationship or they have had face-to-face talks or whatever it is, in general, there's very little coordination and cooperation. And I would love to see that change. That said, I've interacted with police in Austria, for example, who had a good relationship with their counterparts in India, and they were able to take very swift action. Not so much in other countries, including the UK. And it seems to be very, very difficult that if the victim is in the UK and the scammer is in India, for anything to be done. But I'm hoping that'll change.
It seems like a lot of victims are in the US and the UK, at least, when you look at the figures of where the money is being stolen from, those are like usually the top two countries. What do you think makes the US and the UK such attractive targets for scammers?
Number one, language. Okay. Obviously, English is a first or second language in a lot of parts of India. Number two, in general, wealth. Okay, so you are more likely to hit on wealthier targets. There's no two ways about it. These are Western countries, Australia, UK, but most of Europe and the US. In general, you're going to get richer victims. So undoubtedly, that plays a role. But the third bit is, and probably most importantly, data in general. Okay, so lists of phone numbers, lists of occupations. I'm sitting listening to a few scammers here who are running Medicare scams, and they have not even tens of thousands of entries in their spreadsheets. They're hundreds of thousands of people's personal details. And you need all of those things, the language, the spreadsheets, the data, and the expertise. And if you put all those things together, yes, the obvious targets are Western-speaking, English-speaking countries with plenty of data.
Where are they getting all the data from? Is it just all publicly available? Are they paying for it? What have you seen?
It's a question I've wrestled with for 10 years. Where does all the data come from? And the simple answer is there's no one source for it all. It's not just data breaches. It is groups of scammers selling their data to other scammers. And the way you can judge this is I put my fake names out on the internet. And in general, those fake names will be echoed back to me after they've attempted to scam me within about 3 or 4 weeks. There's no one distribution channel. If you looked at certain groups of scammers, they will get their data from sellers on Telegram, from their friends who are in call centers, maybe even some genuine companies who have had a data breach. It could be any of those, but I never or very rarely can see the end-to-end picture of this is where the data came from, this is how it got to the scammer, and this is how they're using it. You very rarely see that. I get a little snapshot and somebody will have emailed a spreadsheet or sent it by WhatsApp, but you will have no idea where that came from in general.
I know Pierogi has been in some like Facebook groups where these scammers will sell data and exchange information about certain victims and things like that. Do you think that Facebook and other social media companies need to be doing more to crack down on these kinds of groups spreading this information?
No, I don't think Facebook should be doing that. I think the police should be sitting on those groups. This, for me, is the low-hanging fruit. These guys sell your and my public data publicly. They use Facebook groups, they use Skype groups, they use Telegram. And honestly, if the police were doing their job, that's where I would start, is you sit on that, you offer to buy some of this, and you go to the people selling it and say, what you've just given me here is illegally obtained data. And, prosecute them for data laws. And it's nice in Europe that there's actually very strong data laws. It's not so good in the US.
Yeah.
It's not so good, which is a real shame, because if they adopted the European model for all of this, you could actually bring a lot of scammers down as a result of that. You sit on those groups, you say, you've just given me this personal data, I'm going to prosecute you. And that would be a great way of proceeding. And honestly, if there was one law that had to change, it's, I would say, get your US data laws really tied down. You can make a huge difference to these guys who sell that.
So wait, what's the difference between the laws in the UK and the laws here?
Okay, there's something called EU GDPR, right, which is it gives anyone in the European Union the ability to, if you have data with a company in general, you can both request what the details of what they hold against you are legally. They have to supply that to you. And particularly if you ask them to remove you from that, they are obliged to do that. And if they don't, or if they can't, or if they have your data illegally, they can have, huge fines as a result of that. And that is written into basically European law. And if you had a weapon like that, if you had a tool like that, where if you're caught dealing with data that you don't have permission to use, then potentially you could maybe not imprison these people, but at least fine them, and that would certainly put them off.
I didn't even know that was a difference. Like, I didn't know that our data laws were so, I guess, weak compared to what you guys have over there.
Yep.
And I was reading through a bunch of reports about scams in the UK and the US, and I noticed there was this huge disparity in the amount of scams that were reported here and the amount of scams that were reported there. People in the UK report scams more than 4 times at the rate than we do here. And so I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that you guys have better laws over there, or different laws at least, that make people more likely to report them.
Honestly, I'd have to speculate on why that would be. Maybe UK people are more grumpy about it, they're more likely. I don't know.
I feel like we're just more stubborn over here.
Yeah,
we just don't want to admit it. We're like, no, you know what? No help, please. I didn't.
Well, I mean, I had a US phone number, and I was saying to the other guys that I had to get rid of it because I was getting just scam calls. And I like scam calls because I can do something with them. But I was getting so many that I couldn't even cope with it, which is bizarre for somebody in my position. But I feel sorry for people who have landlines in the US, because I can listen into them and people just get bombarded by scams. It's awful.
Is the car warranty scam and like the Medicaid scam, is that stuff that you guys have over there, or is that just a purely American?
It's a purely American one. Yeah, there is no such thing as a car warranty or Medicare type thing at all. I mean, even those, strictly the Medicare ones aren't fully fledged scams. There's a whole market for making unwarranted, unsolicited calls.
You're kind of investigating some of those right now. I feel like when we were in that room the other day, you were calling one of those companies. That company was in America, right?
Yeah.
So are these American companies, are they working with call centers in other places?
Oh, they will say they aren't. And that's the thing. I know of quite a lot of, let's call them data brokers or insurance brokers, who get quite a large commission if they manage to sell an insurance or debt relief scheme or whatever to people who have been ultimately called up from somewhere in India. They can't legally make those phone calls in the US because FTC would be able to fine them or whatever else. So what they do is they surreptitiously get a call center in India, typically, to make those phone calls. And then if they will filter out the people who may be interested in what they're trying to sell, and then they will warm transfer that call to the US company. But if you listen to the call center in India, like I say, 1,000 phone calls might result in one sales pitch. But because the call itself hasn't originated in the US, they can get away with this. They've basically delegated the spamming bit of their operation to another country, and that keeps them safe, so they think. But I'm just about to expose some of the companies behind that.
Are these call centers that they're using in India, are they more legit than some of the tech scam refund call centers?
I would say yes, because it's not a true scam in that there is a real product at the end of it all. It's not a scam in the way, Microsoft or Amazon or whatever, the impersonation ones.
Yeah.
But that's not really the issue. The issue is the vast majority of people do not want the phone call, and will tell them that, but they don't care. In fact, what you will see them do is, if they get a sales lead, they will only then look up the do not call registry. So instead of filtering it for the people who don't want the calls, they will call anybody they want. And what they will tell you is that, oh, you might be on a do not call list. If I'm going to give you this sales opportunity, this insurance, this debt relief, whatever, you have to commit to coming off the do not call list. So they will be able to argue that, well, hey, all these leads that we're passing on, they actually want to call because, look, they're not on the do not call list anymore.
Yeah, it's like a social manipulation. It's an engineering thing.
Exactly.
I was actually going to ask if the do not call list was a thing, because I remember hearing that when I was growing up. I'll just say, I want my number put on the do not call list. Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, it is. And US marketing companies are obliged to filter out any phone numbers they got from that list. The Indian call centers do the exact opposite. They don't consult it at all. But if you happen to be on that list, like I say, they will take you or get you to take yourself off that list or agree that you will come off that list before they transfer it. So they are trying to keep themselves legal, but the whole act of ignoring it and just calling anybody they want, that it defeats the purpose of a do not call list.
Why do you think India is such a hotbed for these call centers?
Oh, there's a few reasons for it. I mean, the first and foremost one is know-how more than anything. It takes quite a lot of expertise to set up a call center, and obviously India has been at the forefront of call center technologies. Large companies have kind of outsourced to India. So number one, expertise. I guess number two, the ability to speak reasonable English, and number three, cheap labor. You will get thousands of people applying for call center jobs. And number four, you are very replaceable. If anybody complains about being in a scam call center, they will get, loads of other people to replace them. So they don't care about their workforce. If they can get profits out of this, that's all they care about. So put all that together, and plus, even if it is a scam call center and it gets reported, we have seen that the police are corrupt enough to ignore this, take their backhanders or whatever else. But until very recently, there hasn't been a lot of clampdown. So you put all those things together, and unfortunately, India, and actually a bit more Pakistan nowadays as well, seems to be at the forefront of large scam call centers.
Yeah, I was just going to say that thing about corruption. We've seen that here. We did that big investigation into the Punjab call center, and we actually had CCTV footage of what appeared to be, a police officer taking a pretty significant bribe.
Yep.
Have you run into anything like that when you've been investigating call centers?
I did see your footage on that, and I still think that's incredible that you managed to capture that. I haven't seen it directly or as let's just say, obviously, as you saw it. But, I have, for example, reported certain call centers. I'm thinking one's particularly in Lucknow, and I have provided the police with real evidence of real victims, which is what they want. But as soon as I reported it, the call center went dark. And it could be a coincidence, but I think not. And there was another one called DK Business Patron. Not only did we tip off the police, but we actually were watching on CCTV the whole call center vacate very earlier than they normally would. And 30 minutes later, then they got raided by police. So obviously somebody had made a phone call or had a conversation with somebody there. Undoubted corruption. And I see it in the comments all the time. There's no point in reporting these because, hey, it's just going to go into the back pockets of some policeman. That said, there's definitely occasions where the police have taken action. And I'm glad to say that, Kolkata and Sector 5 in Kolkata used to be the scam capital of anywhere. And they're genuinely clamping down on those. And some of the big players that we know about have been arrested now. But that's taken 3, 4, 5 years to get to that point. But it's a good thing. And I honestly think that almost a chapter has been turned now. And they're actually starting to take more and more use of what Scammer Payback and the other Scambaiters are actually reporting, and it's a good thing, long overdue.
It does feel like things are trending in at least a positive direction. Like I remember when I started working here, 3 years ago now, it felt like no matter how much evidence we had, nothing would get done. I mean, these people were so powerful. They had so much money. Do you think that we're going to ever get to a point where these scam call centers are taken more seriously and they do genuinely prosecute these people?
Yes. So, I mean, I'm thinking about even some of the earliest convictions. I mean, there was one of my first CCTV instances.
Yep.
The guy there was arrested together with the accountant, but when it actually went to trial, basically the police offered no evidence and the guy walked away. And I don't know why that was, but they never actually came to me or anyone else. The BBC were involved in that point as well, to say, what have you seen? What have you done? They just, I don't know why, but I think that's changing now. For the first time actually last year, I've had real police in India reach out to me, and I know it's the same with you guys in Scammer Payback, to say, can you give us some like hints? Have you got any intelligence? And we will act on it. And that's actually the first time even though we've asked in the past for police involvement, that's the first time it's been formally offered. That's a good thing.
It's super interesting to see this like transition too, as a lot of these bigger call centers are getting busted.
Yeah.
You see a lot of these scammers kind of go underground, I guess, and they start operating out of apartments in smaller groups, even though, they might be sharing information, but they're trying to stay separated. Do you think it's going to be harder for the police to deal with those kinds of people, the ones that are just running it out of their home?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the police, whenever you look at some of the police reports, what they love doing is parading scammers, a whole load of them with their phones spread out, and they might be, in handcuffs or hand to hand with police officers. It's always funny. I do think there's a degree of, we would like good publicity shots of all of this, and it's never quite the same if you have individual scammers sitting and you have to go and raid 10 different places. I would hate to think that they wouldn't go after the smaller guys just because they've separated themselves out. But I have a sneaking suspicion that might happen.
That might just end up being the case. I mean, it is harder when there's less of them.
Sure.
But I mean, some of these smaller call centers, they're still taking a lot of money.
Definitely, yeah.
We recently went to go see a victim that was purchasing more than $100,000 worth of gold bars.
Yep.
And I mean, these guys, they weren't running out of a legit call center. It was a very small group. How do you think they've been able to scale so rapidly from $50 Amazon gift cards to hundreds of $1,000s in wire transfers?
Well, that's certainly the biggest change that I have seen. So even 10 years ago when I started up, this is Microsoft and they want a few $100s. These days, I would say the majority of scammers go after life savings. The refund scam is probably the prime example of that. The reason why they want remote access is they want to see what your bank balance looks like. And from that point, they will go after every penny that you have. I'm looking at different sorts of scams as well. So I know it's rarely covered in the channels, but I will be covering it, and hopefully you guys will be as well, which is the investment scams. Those are particularly nasty because it's all set up to try and get more and more money out of the victim. And I've just been looking at my email there, somebody asking for help, and it's the usual story. They have invested in this. They can see their profits growing, even though they didn't realize nothing was probably invested at all, but it's set up like that way. And then they're being asked for more money to withdraw these profits. And that should always be ringing alarm bells. If it's a genuine platform, you should be able to just withdraw it instantly. There should never be barriers in the way. But the hallmark of a scam is you can't just withdraw money, or you're asked for more money or taxes or whatever it is. And this is the worst thing about it, because that really is life savings worth. Because in effect, they build up trust by showing a profit. They will let people withdraw small amounts of it, and that is just to build up that trust. But of course, when you invest more and more, it's just straight into the pockets of scammers. But they will encourage people, and I've listened to the calls, to put their life savings in there, to actually approach other people, other family members, to try and get more money because on paper they are making these profits. And those are the real awful, life-changing scams. And I've just seen that more and more. It's just horrible.
I remember a couple years ago when we were doing people's call center here, Junior got on the phone with a scammer.
Yep.
And he had like it was like a 20-minute kind of heart-to-heart conversation about, why are you doing this? What excuses there for you stealing all this money from people? And it was the classic scammer thing of, well, we have so little and you all have so much. Yeah. So what's the big deal if we steal $200, $300? Because that can go a long way over here. But now you see these scammers taking, you're talking life savings. That's a lot more than $200, $300. Do you think that they're still trying to justify that morally in their head, or do you think they've just gone by the wayside and thought, no, we can get as much as we want, so we're just going to take it?
It's always strange because I've asked scammers quite a lot, why do you do this? They'll never, ever give a genuine reason for it. In general, they don't anyway. So anytime I've asked that question, it's always been an excuse. It's always been, yes, you guys earn so much more than us. Yes, that there is an element of that for sure. But when you know that you're scamming somebody who is vulnerable, I watched a group who had already stolen £100,000 from a lady in the UK. They had spoken to her, they turned on her webcam and stuff. Very obvious that she had dementia. Okay. So they obviously knew how much was in her bank account. They obviously knew she was vulnerable. So you can never say, oh, she's so much richer. They know exactly what's going on there. But I've often tried to get into the heads of people who do this. And I think the only way you can do that is to switch off in your head that it's another human being and instead view that as, here's a bank balance that I need to drain. But nobody has ever said that to me. Nobody has ever been honest enough to say, I don't really care that that's another human being.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm after is the money. But, if your day job is to do that every single day, I think you can get into a mindset where it doesn't, you aren't scamming a human being. You are just going after money to put into your bank account, and you forget the human element completely. It can only be like that, and the only people who have ever felt remorse, in my view, are the people who are in the call center, usually for a very short amount of time. And actually it may bug them. They haven't lost their humanity yet. But I think if you're in there for months at a time and all you're getting is abuse every day, I think you can get into that mindset where you switch off that it's another human being.
You never want to admit, even if you're a scammer and you're committing crime and you're stealing from innocent people, that's probably a tough thing to admit to yourself. Much less the people around you in your life.
Yeah.
They have such a culture over there of, they don't want to bring shame to their elders and the people in their family and their friends. So, you see a lot of these scammers lying about where their money comes from.
Yeah.
Do you think that the videos that we make exposing these scammers, plastering their faces over the internet, do you think that's a useful tool in stopping these scams?
I would like to think if you're a scammer, the worst possible outcome isn't even jail or isn't even being arrested, because if your face is permanently on a YouTube video and you can't get rid of that video, some of them try, I honestly think that's like a permanent record of your scam, and you're not easily going to get rid of that. So I think if it was me, I would nearly dread that more than the police coming to arrest me and you get locked up for a short while. And maybe our videos are putting other scammers off. We'll never know for sure, but I would like to think that maybe they have second thoughts about it, or maybe if you're running a scam call center, I could be the next one. I could be on this hit list for some of the people behind me here. And I would love to think that they're living in fear of that. We'll never know for sure, but it's just nice to have that thought.
I think at least up until recently when they actually started arresting them, it seemed like these expose videos were like some of the biggest tools that we had to combat scammers. Yeah. But then you also worked on something recently, which I think is super interesting, the AI granny time waster with O2. You were involved in that. What was your capacity on that project? What did you do?
They've got a a robotic AI granny. Okay. And it's similar to, if you phone up your bank and give me roughly what you're calling about, is it blah, blah, blah. Okay. So it responds to keywords, but it's, if you listen to, maybe we can play a little snippet of it at some point, but what the AI does is it's trained on how victims might respond to a scammer, but the program is clever enough to take them off at tangents as often as possible.
Your computer is on right now?
No, I think it's off at the moment, but I'll get it turned on in just a moment.
Actually, I'm talking about your private computer, not a company computer.
Well, it's just my personal one, I use it mostly for looking up knitting patterns and, the occasional recipe for scones. Back in my day, we didn't have all this technology. Everything was much simpler. What about you, dear?
Okay. And you think that it is a joke, right? You're trying to kidding with me.
So it gets rewarded on keeping the scammer on a phone call for as long as possible. And my role in all of this was to train Daisy. Okay, so like any other AI, it's only as good as its training. And what we've done is we've used recordings that I have made over the last number of years to train Daisy to speak in a natural way, the way a victim would. So the training is the kind of key bit for all of this. And that's why they wanted to involve me. I have hundreds of thousands of phone calls of real interactions between victims and scammers. And that has helped to train Daisy. Now, that wasn't easy because obviously what we don't want to happen is for Daisy to be too realistic. It took a lot of work to actually get Daisy to the right point where she is realistic enough to appeal to a scammer, but at the same time, she doesn't want to repeat like kind of real life, interactions from other scam victims.
Yeah.
But long and short of it is training. That was my role, train her up.
So obviously, when I first saw this, I was like, this is a great idea. You just have this computer that is just wasting scammers' time constantly. How effective has it actually been?
It's at its early stages. We'll put it like that. It has been like recorded having real interactions with scammers. Again, part of what I did was able to divert Daisy to scam operations. So technically we can get her facing lots and lots of phone calls and see how well she does and then retrain her. So that's part of it. But where we would like to go with it is to have an army of Daisies. So with O2, they're a cell phone company. And the idea is that if a cell phone number isn't being used, the idea is to have Daisy sitting on the end of that.
Gotcha.
So, if people who ring that are actually spraying out phone calls or, reusing old numbers, and the idea is to keep them occupied. And eventually we want to get to a point where if you get a spam phone call yourself, you can effectively forward it to Daisy and listen in on when you're muted, but you can listen in and you can have a bit of fun listening to the scammer.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Just so immediately you don't even have to do the trolling yourself. It's all automated.
So that's the idea.
I was going to say, you said, obviously it's in its early stages, so data's still out, but it could probably be very effective. How do you personally think AI will be effective in combating scams?
Well, I mean, that's one example. And honestly, I would love all telephone and cell companies to adopt Daisy and to have it as a little API. And if you think about that, it may become uneconomic for scammers to just randomly spray out calls the way they do because they're likely to hit Daisy. Now, the thing is, they're eventually going to recognize Daisy's voice. That's the thing. But if you trained it on to have loads of different voices, that's where the real value will come in because it will be impossible to detect, is this a real person or is this AI? And if you listen to some of Daisy's calls, it's incredibly difficult to work out that you're speaking to an AI. She will take intakes of breath between sentences. She will correct herself. She will slow down. And because it's trained on real scam victim calls, she really does give realistic answers. So that's one thing for AI. Obviously, there's other ways that we can get AI to work for us as scam baiters. And honestly, if you can imagine an army of Daisies interacting with scammers all the time I would love to think it becomes uneconomic.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried using a little bit of AI in our stuff, like AI voice changers and things like that. But also, we've seen scammers adopt some AI tools, deep fakes. I saw a video, it was really horribly done deep fake of pierogi asking some woman for an investment, and I'm sure there's, if your face was out there more, there would be deep fakes of you too. I'm sure there's deep fakes of your voice.
Oh, there are. Yeah. And I've heard myself speaking with a Russian accent and stuff like that. I mean,
gosh.
It's kind of weird, but there's definitely deep fakes of me. Any big celebrity, you name them, if you're in the public eye, you're going to have a deep fake made about you.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is it has to be quite targeted because it's kind of resource heavy. If you to create a video, for example, and have somebody's specific name, say, in there, that's a lot of processing power. The vast majority of scammers that we see are on really cheap PCs that can just about run Windows 7, say, on them.
Yeah.
So for the typical scam, that's not really going to take off for a number of years. But yes, if it's targeted, that's very different because if you're going to have a high profile target, a high value target, absolutely AI is your way of going for that. So,
I mean, we saw recently that story with the woman who fell victim to that romance scam where she thought that she was
Brad Pitt.
Yeah, with Brad Pitt. Do you think that AI is going to be a more useful tool for us in fighting scams or scammers in scamming their victims?
I mean, in those sorts of cases, and if somebody's vulnerable and don't know a lot about AI, for example, or that the likelihood of Keanu Reeves or Brad Pitt actually making contact with you, honestly, I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot. I would love to think that there's ways of detecting AI, or if you're showing a video at all, I would love to see something in the corner of websites saying this looks like it's AI. In the same way that we can do this looks like a fake website, I would love to see Microsoft and some of the other browsers kind of pick up on that. I'd love to see it in some of the videos that have been stolen from me and somebody stuck an AI voice. I'd love to see YouTube do it. Hey, this looks like an AI. You sure you want to watch this video?
Yeah.
That would be great because it's one way of combating what's going on at the minute.
Do you think that some of these technology companies, maybe not YouTube necessarily, but do they bear some sort of responsibility for the people that are getting scammed on their platforms or with AI?
I might have a different view to most people, but there's a degree of responsibility, yes. And if something gets reported, they have an obligation to do something, yes. I mean, a lot of scammers put adverts on Google for their phone numbers, for example.
Yeah.
Should Google be going in and testing whether that is a legitimate phone number or not? I don't see how they could ever do that. I in some way I sympathize with them, but it's different. If that number is reported to Google, they should be taking action then. But make your reporting easy and actionable and quick, but proactively looking for adverts which are misleading or phone numbers which don't point to the right company. No, I don't think they should do that. I think it would be impossible.
What about remote access companies? We've seen AnyDesk has really made a lot of big strides over the last couple of years. They worked with you, they worked with us to really try and crack down on the amount of scammers that are using their software. Do you think that other companies have a responsibility to try and do something about it too?
I think yes, because obviously their own software is being abused, and one of the biggest reasons why AnyDesk is working with us is their name became synonymous with scams, and that's awful because the software is good, genuinely good. And if I was working for that company, I would do everything in my power to try to change that, and it is changing, and that's the good thing about it. And I think without the interventions of AnyDesk taking responsibility for their own brand image, and I think every company should be able to do this. It's not a difficult ask, and if your product's being abused, I can't understand why companies wouldn't engage with ways of combating that. And they don't have to be complicated. I mean, we have a very simple Discord forum, and some scam baiters report in people whose IDs are being used for scams, and we put a little bit of evidence in there as well. And by and large, that's quite effective. So if you can do things simply and cheaply, I don't see why you wouldn't do this. The likes of Facebook and Google and so on could look at what's happening with scams and take it a little bit more seriously. I think an awful lot of work could be done to combat them. So yeah, you don't need to be proactive, but at least listen to reports.
How do you think scams are going to change over the next 10 years?
I mean, obviously the buzzword's still AI with it,
Yep.
but we've kind of covered that. Honestly, I've seen the trend. I don't know is the short answer, but I've seen things more recently which say that scammers in general are going to go after larger sums of money. They're no longer content with getting away with a few $100s at a time. And there's still room for those sort of scams, and you can still see them happening. But I can see them being more selectively targeting people. And when you can do that, then it does open itself up to AI. You do your homework on your victim, and you become more convincing because you've got some of their social media. You can play them videos of Brad Pitt talking to them, or you use AI to create messages from your family, which are convincing.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, I do think that's the way things are going to go. We see the elements of it at the minute where people randomly call up saying, hey, this is your grandson or this is your granddaughter. And, you know, that those sorts of scams, I'm sure, are going to pick up. As for other sorts of scams, honestly, it's difficult to tell. Technology changes too quickly, to be honest. But you can be certain sure that as technology changes, the scammers will be right there trying to make use of it for the scams.
Do you think AI is dangerous?
I
know that's kind of a loaded question,
yeah,
but
it's sort of. I know that like Elon Musk and people like that said it could be the end of society and all the rest of it.
and yet there is Grok AI on Twitter, even though he said that. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. No, I don't even start me about Elon Musk. But I think the short answer is it has its place. I think it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but it's like any other technology. It will either expand and grow, or it's a buzzword for the next few years and people will go, actually, it doesn't really give us the kind of results we want or we need, and it might just sort of drop by the wayside again. I've got a feeling it might go that way. It's got its place. It won't be as prolific as I think some people will make out.
It's kind of interesting, to have seen, obviously, the rapid rise of language models and image AIs and these kinds of things over the last 2 or 3 years, I would say, was when it was a buzzword.
Yep.
And slowly but surely things are starting to get more difficult to tell whether they're real or not.
Yep.
And I've kind of found myself thinking about in the future whether or not the advancement in technology is going to help us discern whether or not these things are real, or if it's just going to get so good that we'll never be able to tell. And that to me at least is like the scariest thing.
Yeah, and that's true. And, how do you know whether an image is real or not? That's why I think there has to be something, if it's a video or an audio or whatever, I think there will have to be some protocol, whatever it is in the future, to say, this is a real image, this is a real photograph, this is a real video, compared to something which is AI generated. And I think without that, we're in dire danger of not knowing what's true and false.
All right, well, I'm going to hit you with a few just kind of rapid fire, just roundup questions.
Absolutely.
What's something that people can do right now to stop themselves from being a victim of a scam?
Very easy. If it's a phone call, break the phone call and research it. That's the simplest way of figuring out whether it's a scam or not. Ask other people.
We obviously have People's Call Center, and we're potentially doing another big one in the UK. I won't say too much else about that.
Yep.
Do you think it will be effective if we set that up as a full-time thing that the government maybe could run or be participating in?
I would say I would love, honestly, People's Call Center to be set up 24/7, run by people who enjoy doing that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It's nothing better, by the way, than winding up scammers. So I'd love to see it happen,
What's one thing that you think people should know about scams that doesn't get talked about enough?
Yeah, it's very simply, if there's something about the conversation you're having with whoever it is on the phone that doesn't make sense to you, ask questions. Okay, there's one thing that scammers hate the most, and that is questions. So my simple advice would be keep asking questions. If you don't like the answers you're hearing, get out of there.
Obviously, for a period of time, most of your videos were faceless. in recent years. You've done more interviews masked up, a little bit, the eyes on the camera, these kind of things. Are you more scared now, or were you more scared before of your real identity being exposed?
I probably was more scared then. Now it doesn't matter to me quite as much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm still being as cautious as I can be.
Okay, well, since it doesn't matter to you as much, that brings me to my perfect last question. What is your real name?
Yeah, it's actually Ryan Montgomery.
Jim, thank you for sitting down with me. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Daniel. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for having the whole group here.
Of course.